There is a moment in every awakened life when a strange, unsettling realization begins to surface. That the world you move through is not simply happening to you, it is happening from you, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but in the most intimate, quantum-precise way. Reality repeats because you repeat. Every pattern that returns, every familiar disappointment, every almost identical challenge dressed in new clothing, these are not random sequences drifting through your timeline. They are reflections, echoes, energetic returns of something unresolved within your field of consciousness. And until the inner origin is understood, the outer expression cannot change. Reality mirrors the frequency you carry, not the story you wish for. This is the quantum mirror effect, the phenomenon where unprocessed emotion, suppressed memory, and silent beliefs reorganize the external world into recurring shapes. The universe does not do this as punishment. It does it as precision. In Bohm's language, the implicate order unfolds into the explicate with mathematical fidelity. What is folded within you becomes the pattern you encounter outside of you. To consciousness, repetition is not failure, it is communication. Think of your life as a holographic projection. In a hologram, every part contains the whole, and every distortion in one segment transforms the entire image. So when an emotion remains unresolved, it behaves like a crease in the holographic plate. No matter how many times you print the picture, the distortion appears again. Different scenes, same crease. Different people, same impact. Different hopes, same outcome. This is why the same lesson returns disguised as a new situation. Why the same relationship dynamic finds its way into new faces. Why the same fear carries you through different chapters with the same conclusion. Life is not showing you what is wrong with the world. It is showing you what is incomplete within yourself. Unprocessed emotion has gravity. It pulls future events into alignment with its frequency. This gravity is not emotional in a casual sense. It is energetic, measurable, and precise. Heart math calls it the field imprint, a coherent electromagnetic signature created by the emotional state within the heart-brain system. Whatever signature you transmit becomes the scaffolding upon which reality constructs your next experience. But the quantum mirror effect goes deeper. Your conscious mind may forget. Your thinking mind may outgrow the story. Your logic may say, "I am past this." But the field does not operate by thought. It operates by truth. And truth is whatever remains unhealed. This is why patterns repeat until they are recognized. This is why the universe does not whisper, it echoes, because echoes are the only language strong enough to reach the parts of you that turned silent long ago. Reality is not looping because you are cursed or unlucky. It loops because consciousness refuses to abandon you. It keeps bringing you the same frequency until you realize the mirror is not mocking you, it is guiding you. What returns is what seeks to be released. What repeats is what seeks to be understood. What reflects is what seeks to be integrated. You do not break the loop by fighting the mirror. You break it by finally seeing yourself in it. When you understand this, the repeating world around you becomes something else entirely. Not punishment, not coincidence, but the very first sign that you are waking up. Subconscious inertia, the law of vibrational repetition. If the conscious mind is the storyteller of your life, the subconscious is the silent architect, the one responsible for designing every unseen structure that your experience will eventually inhabit. And while your conscious thoughts shift day to day, moment to moment, your subconscious operates through patterns, stable, rhythmic, persistent frequencies that hold the blueprint of your inner world. This is where vibrational repetition begins. Subconscious inertia is the momentum of emotional memory. It is the tendency of internal states to continue propagating across time, recreating the same situations, because the underlying vibration has not yet changed. Your subconscious does not choose these loops deliberately. It merely continues broadcasting the energetic instructions it was given long before you were aware you were giving them. Most people assume the subconscious is a storehouse of beliefs and old memories, but it is far more than that. It is an engine, a generator, a frequency emitter. It does not care about the logic of your desires. It cares about the consistency of your energy. If you feel unworthy long enough, the subconscious adopts unworthiness as a baseline frequency. If you feel unsafe long enough, it anchors fear as the gravitational center of your decisions. If heartbreak becomes familiar, the subconscious treats it as home, no matter how much you consciously want something different. This is why life can feel cyclical, predictable, even suffocating. Not because nothing is changing, but because the inner tuning is unchanged. The universe mirrors the signal, not the intention. Imagine a pendulum set into motion. Unless acted upon by an external force, it continues swinging in the same arc, repeating the same movement indefinitely. Emotional frequencies operate the same way. Pain that was never expressed continues swinging. Fear that was never questioned continues swinging. Shame that was never healed continues swinging. And with each swing, it imprints itself into the circumstances you call life. This is why vibrational repetition feels so familiar. The subconscious is not trying to sabotage you. It's trying to maintain equilibrium. To it, even a harmful emotional pattern feels safer than an unfamiliar one. The subconscious avoids uncertainty the way the physical body avoids sudden temperature shifts. Its prime directive is stability, not happiness. This is what Carl Jung meant when he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." He wasn't speaking poetically, he was describing frequency mechanics. Whatever vibrational signature dominates the subconscious becomes the default attractor of your experience. This inertia persists until a new frequency, a new emotional tone disrupts the pattern. But this disruption cannot come from wishful thinking or surface-level affirmations. The subconscious reads emotion, not vocabulary. It responds to coherence, not declarations. You cannot trick it. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot outrun what you refuse to feel. This is why so many spiritual paths eventually lead inward, not to think better thoughts, but to metabolize the emotional residue that keeps the subconscious vibrating in old rhythms. In the quantum view, repetition is simply resonance. The frequency you hold resonates with equivalent experiences in the field, drawing them into form. Nothing personal, nothing mystical, just the physics of consciousness. When you realize this, the loops in your life become intelligible. You begin to see that the repetition isn't cruelty, it's consistency. The subconscious will keep broadcasting yesterday's frequency until you consciously choose tomorrow's. This is the doorway out of repetition. Not force, not willpower, but a shift in the vibration you've carried for years without even noticing. And this shift begins with awareness the moment you recognize that your life is not stuck. It is simply repeating what has not yet been transformed. The cycle of reaction, how each emotional response feeds the same outcome. Every human life is shaped not only by external events, but by the internal responses those events ignite. What happens to you matters far less than what happens within you as a result. And this inner reaction, subtle or explosive, conscious or unconscious, becomes the seed of the next experience you will encounter. So, the cycle continues. The moment something triggers you, a disappointment, a criticism, a fear, a memory, your emotional body emits a specific vibrational pattern. This pattern is not abstract energy, it is a measurable biochemical cascade. Neurotransmitters shift, hormones release, your heart rhythm changes, your electromagnetic field reorganizes. Your subconscious records the entire event as a template for future reactions. You may think you are simply feeling something, but what you are actually doing is sending instructions into the field. Your emotional response becomes the tuning fork. If the response carries anger, you reinforce the frequency of conflict. If it carries fear, you reinforce the frequency of danger. If it carries abandonment, you reinforce the frequency of loss. Every reaction becomes a broadcast. Every broadcast becomes an invitation. And reality precise, impartial, mathematical responds. This is the cycle most people never see. You react to the world based on old wounds. The reaction strengthens the emotional frequency. The strengthened frequency magnetizes experiences that mirror the wound. The new experience triggers the same reaction again, and the wheel turns. To the unconscious self, this feels like fate. To the conscious self, this reveals itself as pattern. To consciousness itself, this is simply feedback. This is why the same types of moments return. Life is not repeating events, it is repeating your response to them. The quantum field behaves like a hall of mirrors. Every emotional frequency you project expands into countless reflections, and eventually one of them collapses into physical form. That collapsed reflection becomes your next moment, your next decision, your next reality. This is not mystical speculation, it is the mechanics of coherence. The HeartMath Institute has demonstrated that the heart's electromagnetic field extends well beyond the body, interacting with the environment in a dynamic exchange. Your emotional state is not contained within your skull. It is radiated, sensed, and mirrored. But the cycle goes even deeper. Your reactions are rarely born in the present moment. They are echoes of older experiences, childhood wounds, inherited beliefs, buried fears that were never resolved. When something hurts you today, it often activates a wound created decades earlier. And your reaction is not to the present, it is to the past disguised as now. In this way, every reaction is both a memory and a prophecy. It remembers what you survived. It predicts what you will encounter again. The cycle becomes self-sustaining. The emotion becomes familiar. The familiar becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. But there is a subtle truth that marks the beginning of awakening. Patterns don't repeat because you haven't healed. They repeat because you haven't seen the problem, reaction that keeps them alive. The universe will keep reflecting the same emotional pattern until the moment you pause not to judge yourself, not to suppress the reaction, but to recognize it with clarity. In that instant, the cycle falters. In that instant, something new becomes possible, because the loop is not held in place by what happens to you. It is held in place by how you respond, and when your response changes, the entire future reorganizes itself. Psychological roots, Jung's theory of recurring fate. If quantum science explains how reality reflects our inner patterns, Jungian psychology explains why those patterns exist in the first place. To Jung, life was not a random sequence of unrelated events. It was a dialogue between the conscious self and the deeper psyche, attempting to reveal its own structure. What appears as repetition on the surface is, at a psychological level, the psyche's attempt to make itself known. Jung called this phenomenon enantiodromia, the return of the repressed. Whatever the conscious mind pushes away, fear, grief, desire, anger, vulnerability, eventually returns in external form. Not because the world is cruel, but because the psyche refuses to let the rejected parts of you vanish into shadow. The more you resist them, the more power they gain, and the more urgently they demand recognition. This is the root of recurring fate. A person who suppresses their anger encounters people who provoke it. One who denies their vulnerability attracts relationships that expose it. Someone who believes they are unseen draws experiences that confirm invisibility. not because they deserve it, but because the psyche is showing them what must be reclaimed. Jung believed that the unconscious does not simply lie dormant, it organizes experience. It influences the people you're drawn to, the conflicts you walk into, the opportunities that appear and disappear. It choreographs the outer world to reflect the inner one, not as punishment, but as prophecy. He famously wrote, "Whatever you repress persists externally as fate." In other words, what you refuse to face within yourself will return as an experience outside of yourself. The psyche uses the world as a stage to reveal the hidden drama playing at the core of your being. This is why unhealed patterns feel so hauntingly familiar. This is why the same storyline returns with new characters. This is why the same lesson arrives in new circumstances. Because the unconscious is not trying to harm you, it is trying to complete something. According to Jung, every human being is driven by a deep, instinctive urge toward individuation, the integration of all parts of the psyche into wholeness. But integration cannot occur through avoidance. It occurs only when the unconscious becomes conscious, when you see the pattern instead of merely enduring it. Recurring fate is the psyche's invitation to integrate the unlived parts of yourself. If you avoid your power, life sends situations where power must be found. If you avoid your grief, life brings moments where tears unlock truth. If you avoid your truth, life places you in rooms where pretending becomes unbearable. The repetition is not a loop, it is a message. Life is not trapping you, it is teaching you. Every recurring challenge is a fragment of the unconscious rising into view. Every repeated heartbreak is a forgotten wound, resurfacing for healing. Every familiar disappointment is a part of you asking to be seen with new eyes. When Jung spoke of fate, he did not mean destiny in a mystical sense. He meant psychological inevitability, the natural outcome of unresolved inner patterns manifesting externally. But here is the essential truth he also taught. The moment you see the pattern, you are no longer the pattern. Recognition dissolves inevitability. Awareness breaks the spell. What once felt like fate becomes choice. And this is where the cycle begins to loosen the moment. You realize that the life repeating around you is not a prison, but a mirror held up by the deepest, most ancient part of your own psyche, waiting for you to finally recognize yourself. Quantum analogy. An uncollapsed wave continues to echo until consciously observed. In quantum physics, a phenomenon exists that mirrors the deepest patterns of human experience with uncanny precision. It is the principle of the uncollapsed wave, the idea that, until a particle is consciously observed, it remains in a state of probability, repeating its potential endlessly across the field. Not moving forward, not resolving, not transforming, simply echoing, waiting for awareness to choose its final form. This is the perfect analogy for the unresolved experiences in your life. Every unhealed emotion, every ignored memory, every truth you were not ready to face functions like a quantum wave. It lingers, it vibrates, it persists as unexpressed possibility. And until you turn your conscious attention toward it, the pattern refuses to collapse. It continues manifesting versions of itself in the world around you. In physics, this is known as the observer effect. The act of observation changes the behavior of the system being observed. Prior to observation, the particle is not a particle at all. It exists as a wave of infinite potential states, each one waiting for conscious selection. Once observed, the wave collapses into a single outcome. Your emotional patterns operate in exactly the same way. Your heartbreak is not a single event, it is a wave of unprocessed emotion. Your fear is not one memory, it is a field of unresolved echoes. Your self-doubt is not a thought, it is a persistent probability. And until you turn toward these internal waves with your full awareness, they continue to unfold themselves in your life as recurring experience. Quantum physics teaches that potential is not passive, it is active, dynamic, and deeply responsive to observation. The unobserved wave does not disappear, it simply repeats. It manifests the same interference pattern every time, creating identical outcomes even in new conditions. In the same way, an emotion you refuse to acknowledge continues generating similar life experiences, even as the external circumstances appear different. The pattern feels uncanny. Why does this keep happening? Why does this feel familiar? Why am I back in the same place again? Because the internal wave is still uncollapsed, because the lesson has not yet been seen, because consciousness has not yet observed the truth with presence rather than resistance. David Bohm described reality as a hollow movement, a living field where the inner and the outer continually fold into each other. Your inner waveforms become external structures, and those structures reflect back into your psyche, creating a seamless loop of meaning. Nothing occurs in isolation. Every moment is part of a dialogue between your intention and the deeper field. In this context, repetition loses its mystery. The wave has not yet been witnessed, the emotion has not yet been embraced, the truth has not yet been named. And so the universe replays the same message in different forms, hoping that one day you will pause long enough, gently enough, courageously enough to meet the wave with your full attention. When you finally observe the unresolved pattern within yourself, truly observe, without judgment, without resistance, something remarkable happens. The wave collapses, the loop dissolves, the reality reorganizes, not because the world changed, but because you did. In quantum terms, observation is creation. In human terms, awareness is liberation. And once the wave collapses, the pattern no longer needs to echo. It becomes meaning instead of repetition, lesson instead of fate, freedom instead of cycle. This is the power of conscious observation, the moment where the physics of the universe meets the truth of your inner world, and the repetition that once felt inevitable finally becomes transformable. Recognition as liberation, seeing the loop dissolves its pattern. There comes a moment in every repeating cycle, subtle, quiet, almost invisible, when something inside you recognizes the pattern, not intellectually, not as an idea, but as a lived realization. I have been here before. That moment is not small, it is seismic. It is the first crack in the architecture of the loop that has shaped your life. Recognition is not passive. Recognition is not observation alone. Recognition is consciousness remembering itself. In that instant, you are no longer inside the story blindly reacting. You are witnessing the story from the outside. You are no longer the character, you are the awareness holding the character. And that shift is everything. The moment you see the loop can no longer control you. This is because patterns rely on unconsciousness. They require repetition of the same reaction, the same emotional frequency, the same predictable response. They depend on your automaticity. They depend on you not noticing. The pattern survives through your lack of awareness. But the moment you recognize what is happening, the machinery loses its fuel. The emotional chain that once activated with absolute certainty suddenly wavers. There is space, a pause, a breath, a strange clarity where there used to be only compulsion. And in that pause, you are free, not fully liberated yet, but no longer enslaved. Not entirely transformed, but no longer unconscious. Recognition breaks the spell. Jung understood this intimately. He believed that awareness alone carries a transformative power because it brings the unconscious into the light of consciousness. When you name a pattern, you pull it from the shadows where it once operated with impunity. When you see it clearly, you reclaim the authority it once held over your life. This is why the universe keeps repeating experiences until you see them. Not because you failed the lesson, not because you are being punished, but because recognition is the key that unlocks the entire structure. To see a pattern is to remove its invisibility. To remove its invisibility is to dissolve its inevitability, and to dissolve its inevitability is to reveal your freedom. Think of emotional patterns as frequencies looping back into your field. The moment you recognize the loop, the frequency destabilizes. It can no longer repeat itself with the same purity, the same momentum. Awareness disrupts resonance. It rewrites the signal. Recognition is a collapse of identification. I am not this fear. I am not this wound. I am not this story repeating itself. This inner declaration is not spoken with words. It is spoken with presence. It is felt. It is understood in the body before the mind even catches up. And in that understanding, you reclaim the power that the pattern borrowed from you. Recognition liberates because it interrupts the unconscious agreement you once made with your own history. As long as you believe the loop is happening to you, it continues with full force. But the moment you see it as something happening from you, the dynamic changes completely. The locus of power returns to your hands. The pattern may still appear for a while. Old momentum takes time to dissolve, but it no longer hooks you in the same way. A reaction that once lasted days now dissolves in minutes. A trigger that once consumed your energy now reveals itself as a messenger. You begin to see the loop not as a threat, but as a teaching. This is liberation in its earliest form. Not the ending of the cycle, but the awakening that makes the ending possible. Patterns repeat until you see them. Once you see them, they begin to fall apart, and what falls apart no longer defines you. Recognition is the beginning of freedom, and freedom begins the moment you realize you were never truly trapped, only unawake to the power you've carried all along. How awareness shifts the energetic blueprint of the moment. Awareness is not a passive witness. It is not an intellectual acknowledgement or a mental nod toward what's happening within you. True awareness is an energetic event, a shift in the field, a reorganization of the very blueprint that guides your reality. When you become aware of a repeating pattern, you do more than understand it. You alter the frequency that once sustained it. Inside every moment lives a subtle architecture of energy, a configuration of emotion, memory, belief, physiology, and attention. This blueprint determines how you perceive the world, how the world responds to you, and which possibilities collapse into form. Most people assume the moment is fixed, external, and separate. But the moment is not happening to you, it is happening through you, shaped by the signature you are broadcasting into the field. Awareness changes that signature instantly. When you become aware of a pattern, something extraordinary occurs. Your energy stops unconsciously rehearsing the past. The emotional loops that once dictated your choices begin to lose their authority. The heart's electromagnetic rhythm, which had been encoding fear or shame or unworthiness, suddenly shifts into coherence. The nervous system softens. The body stops bracing against the ghosts of yesterday. Awareness interrupts the continuity of the old vibration. This interruption may be brief, a second, a breath, a flicker of clarity, but it is enough to destabilize the pattern. The frequency that once sustained the loop can no longer sustain itself with the same force. Awareness is like light entering a dark room. The darkness does not need to be fought, removed, or conquered. It simply reorganizes in the presence of illumination. This is why conscious insight feels like a soft release, a loosening of tension, a widening of space around an experience that once felt suffocating. You are not changing the external world yet. You are changing the inner environment that interprets it, and interpretation is creation. When your awareness enters the moment, it does more than observe. It reconfigures the meaning you assign to what you see. Meaning is the bridge between energy and reality. Whatever meaning you assign becomes the emotional foundation of your next action, and your next action becomes the blueprint for your future. This is how awareness transforms destiny, by altering the meaning that fuels the pattern. Without awareness, the same trigger leads to the same interpretation, the same emotion, the same choice, the same outcome. With awareness, the loop loses its automatic momentum. You begin to see the trigger as a messenger instead of a threat, the emotion as energy instead of identity, the moment as information instead of punishment. The energetic blueprint of the moment begins to reorganize. Awareness creates choice. Choice creates new frequency. New frequency creates new reality. This is not metaphor, it is physics. In the quantum field, a system cannot shift until its observer becomes aware of its previous state. The moment the observer makes contact with the pattern, the potential reorganizes. In human consciousness, the same rule applies. Your awareness collapses old potentials and opens new ones. Every moment you bring conscious presence to a repeating pattern, you weaken the force that once powered it. You dissolve the emotional charge that kept it alive. You reclaim the energy that was locked in its orbit. Awareness is the key that unlocks the entire architecture of repetition, not by force, not by effort, but by illumination. And when illumination enters the moment stops repeating, because it no longer needs to teach you what you now clearly see. A method to trace your dominant emotional frequency over the last 30 days. If patterns repeat because frequency repeats, then awakening begins with one essential act: discovering the emotional frequency you've been broadcasting without realizing it. Consciousness is always communicating, but much of its communication is subtle, felt in the body, shaped in the subconscious, expressed through instinct rather than language. To trace your dominant emotional frequency is to uncover the silent signal that has been writing the script of your recent life. This is not about judging yourself or analyzing every moment. It is about learning how to listen to your inner field. Emotion is not random, it is rhythmic, and over the span of weeks, the emotional body reveals its patterns with breathtaking clarity. Begin not with your thoughts, but with your lived experience. Look back at the last 30 days of your life, not the events themselves, but the emotional atmosphere that surrounded them. You'll notice that beneath the surface of everything that happened, there was a tone, a flavor, a frequency that showed up repeatedly. It may have appeared in different situations, but its texture remained the same. Perhaps it was a low hum of anxiety, a quiet fear that made you overthink every interaction. Perhaps it was a lingering sadness, a soft ache that colored each day with a muted hue. Perhaps it was frustration, or numbness, or uncertainty, or longing. Or perhaps it was a subtle hope, a gentle opening, a sense of possibility slowly returning. Whatever it was not isolated. It was your field attempting to speak. Every emotional frequency leaves a trail. Every trail leads back to something unhealed, unresolved, or ready to evolve. To trace your dominant frequency, you must allow yourself to feel backward. Memory stored in the mind is often distorted, but memory stored in the body is honest. Close your eyes and let yourself move through the last month in slow motion. Instead of recalling events, recall sensations. What emotion greeted you when you woke in the morning? What emotion lingered before you fell asleep? What emotion sat behind your decisions, even when you didn't name it? The body does not lie. It remembers the field. When you find this recurring emotional signature, you begin to understand why certain experiences manifested the way they did. Emotion is the magnet that shapes your timeline. It draws toward you the people, situations, and synchronicities that match its frequency. This is not punishment, it is coherence. The field responds to whatever tone you emit most consistently. But tracing your frequency is not only about understanding the past, it is about reclaiming the power to choose a new future. Once you identify the emotional imprint of the last 30 days, something subtle shifts. You are no longer inside the frequency unconsciously. You are witnessing it consciously. And awareness, as always, destabilizes what was once automatic. You begin to notice when that emotion arises again. You feel it before it hijacks your reaction. You catch the familiar pattern at the moment of activation. This recognition is a turning point, the moment where repetition becomes visible and therefore transformable. Because once you see the frequency, you can choose a new one. Not by force, but by presence. Not by resistance, but by replacement. Not by trying to escape the emotion, but by giving it breath, and then gently shifting your internal state toward coherence, even if only by 1 degree. Tracing your emotional frequency is the map. Awareness is the compass. And the moment you begin reading both, your reality stops repeating and starts responding instead. This is where awakening ceases to be mystical and becomes practical. A conscious navigation of the field you are creating with every heartbeat, every breath, every feeling you allow yourself to fully see. Replacing repetition with resonance, creating new cycles through the choice of feeling. Once you've traced the emotional frequency governing your recent life, a profound truth becomes clear. Patterns don't end because circumstances change. They end because you choose a new emotional reality to inhabit. The field responds not to your wishes or your words, but to the resonance you embody. And resonance begins with the conscious choice of feeling. This choice is subtle, a shift in the internal climate rather than an external action. It begins the moment you realize that the emotional state you've been repeating is not a fixed identity, but a habit of energy. It is familiar, not factual. It is practiced, not permanent. And like any habit, it can be replaced once it is seen with enough truthfulness. The key is understanding that resonance is not forced. It is not manufactured. It is not a performance or an affirmation wrapped in positive language. Resonance is coherence, a harmonious alignment between your thoughts, emotions, body, and field. It emerges naturally when you choose a feeling that aligns with your deeper truth rather than your old wounds. But how do you choose a feeling? You begin by acknowledging the emotional signature you've been living in, not resisting it, not judging it, not trying to transcend it prematurely. Instead, you allow it to be felt fully, so that the energy it contains can be released. When you feel an emotion consciously, the pattern that stored it begins to dissolve. Space opens, breath returns. The nervous system resets. In that space, you ask a quiet question. What feeling would align with the version of myself I'm becoming? This question is not intellectual, it is intuitive. Your body knows the answer long before your mind interprets it. Sometimes the new feeling is courage. Sometimes it is peace. Sometimes it is groundedness, curiosity, compassion, or trust. And sometimes the new feeling is something as simple as neutrality, the non-reactive presence that breaks the chain of emotional inheritance. Whatever it is, the choice must be authentic. A forced emotion creates distortion. A chosen emotion creates resonance. When you shift into this new emotional tone, even for a moment, the energetic blueprint of your field reorganizes. Your heart coherence changes. Your electromagnetic signature stabilizes. The frequency you broadcast becomes clearer, softer, more intentional. And the quantum field responds immediately, not always with dramatic events, but with subtle openings, new insights, different reactions from others, shifted timelines that were previously unavailable. You are no longer living from repetition, you are living from resonance. The more consistently you choose this new feeling, the more the old pattern loses momentum. Emotional inertia begins to reverse. The subconscious, once loyal to the familiar wound, starts adapting to the new frequency. It rewrites its baseline. Your nervous system begins associating safety with the new feeling instead of the old one. This is how a cycle ends, not through resistance, but through replacement. And this is how a new cycle begins, through the repeated, conscious embodiment of a chosen emotional frequency. Every moment becomes a fork in your timeline. You can choose the old emotional signature, the one shaped by memory and reflex, or you can choose the new one, the one shaped by intention and presence. The field will reorganize around whichever feeling you anchor most consistently. This is the deepest truth behind awakening. Your reality shifts when your resonance shifts. Your resonance shifts when your feeling shifts. Your feeling shifts when your awareness chooses differently. You are not escaping your past, you are outgrowing its frequency. And as you do, the loops that once defined your life begin to crumble, revealing an entirely new pattern emerging from the space where repetition once lived. A pattern created not by unconscious emotion, but by conscious resonance. Life stops repeating when you stop running from what it's trying to teach you. There is a moment subtle, almost imperceptible, when the entire architecture of your life begins to shift. Not because everything around you suddenly changes, but because you stop running from the very experiences that were designed to awaken you. Life has never been your enemy. It has been your mirror, your mentor, your silent companion, repeating the same patterns with infinite patience, waiting for you to finally turn toward them instead of away. Every repeated moment has been a message. Every familiar challenge has been a doorway. Every recurring emotion has been a teacher disguised as discomfort. Life does not repeat itself out of cruelty. It repeats out of precision. It will continue replaying the same lessons until the part of you that has long been fragmented is ready to come home. Because the universe is not trying to punish you, it is trying to complete you. When you stop running, something miraculous happens. The pattern turns into presence. For years, you may have believed that moving faster, trying harder, or reshaping the world around you could free you from the cycles that kept returning. But liberation was never in the external rearrangement of circumstances. Liberation has always lived in the moment you stop avoiding the truth your life has been quietly pointing toward. Running keeps the loop alive. Avoidance fuels repetition. Resistance strengthens the very pattern you want to escape. But turning toward the pattern, meeting it with awareness, honesty, and compassion dissolves its power instantly. The chase ends. The fear softens. The emotional gravity that once pulled similar experiences back into your timeline loses its momentum. What was once a loop becomes a lesson, and what was once fate becomes freedom. This is the paradox of awakening. The pattern ends the moment you stop trying to end it. When you finally face the emotion, the memory, the unmet truth at the heart of the repetition, you step into alignment with life instead of opposition. And in that alignment, the universe reorganizes itself. The same situations no longer find you because the frequency that invited them has dissolved. The same relationships no longer wound you because the parts of you that opened the door to those dynamics are no longer alive in the same way. The same fears no longer shape your choices because you have learned how to feel them without being defined by them. You become someone new, not by forcing transformation, but by allowing awareness to do what resistance never could. Life stops repeating not when the world changes, but when you do. Not when patterns disappear, but when they are understood. Not when you outrun the past, but when you integrate it. In this integration, you become coherent. In this coherence, you become magnetic. In this magnetism, you no longer attract lessons, you attract creation. Awakening is not an escape from life. It is the moment you realize life has been guiding you all along. And when you finally listen, when you finally stop, resisting the very experiences designed to awaken you, the field, the psyche, the universe itself opens into a new resonance, a resonance shaped not by repetition, but by remembrance, not by wounds, but by wisdom, not by cycles, but by choice. The loop ends because the seeker has awakened. The repetition dissolves because the truth has been seen. And what remains is the beginning of a new timeline, not born from the past, but chosen from presence. This is Quantum Quest, where consciousness becomes the experiment,